Many animals have unique features acquired in the process of evolution. But what was once helpful is not only useless today, but can even be deadly. Let's go. If you have an older brother or sister, you're probably familiar with the situation where instead of shopping, you have to wear other people's things. It's not much fun. But for hermit crabs, such a second-hand system is a matter of life and death. Literally. Like many creatures, hermit crabs grow throughout their life, but their shells stay the same size, which means as time passes, they simply have to find a new one. And this is a situation where size does matter.
And this one is far too spacious for this crab.
As does time. Hermit crabs need shells or they'll bake under the severe rays of the sun in a few hours. But demand in the local real estate market often exceeds supply, so you have to get creative. If a loose shell is too big, the hermit crab that was about to move in will stay nearby and wait for a larger fellow to approach the find. Why? To pick up its shell when it's free, of course. Meanwhile, while the first crab waits, others gather around and do the same. Eventually, a line forms, and then all slides into chaos. We can't say that hermit crabs are particularly fast creatures, but in those seconds, their lives depend on their speed. Once they leave their shell, they risk not returning to it, and what if the one chosen in the meantime has already been taken? The sun will dispose of the poor guy too quickly. Unless, of course, it gets eaten by some predator. But even in the most desperate situation, the hermit crab still has a chance to find a home. It may seem strange, but it will be saved by a dump. Humans have managed to turn almost the entire planet into a dump. And only the hermit crabs can be at least a little grateful for that. They use empty metal cans, cardboard cups, all sorts of trash instead of shells. I don't think it does them any good, but if you have to choose between a mackerel can and an agonizing death, yeah, I guess I'd choose mackerel. By the way, don't think that evolution has played such a cruel joke on only the smaller members of the animal kingdom. In fact, a lot of them have problems. Even bears. For many of them, like American black bears, winter hibernation is a way to pass the time until more food is available. They almost always hibernate alone, and in some regions, hibernation can last up to 7 months. To survive such a long period without food or water, bears slow down their metabolism. But hunger and cold aren't the only threats to the hibernating predator. Sometimes dens suffer from early flooding, but more often wolves, other bears that don't hibernate, or humans find them. All of them, of course, are just thrilled with such prey, and if you think a bear's too big for anyone to risk a fight with, just look at this.
Look at it. Look at that. Oh, man. There now.
Even though normally the odds may be about even, in the midst of hibernation, a bear is simply doomed. Although bears are hindered by simply having their eyes closed, deer and other ungulates aren't okay by having their eyes open. Nature has gifted them with dichromatic vision. In other words, they see neither red, yellow, or orange hues. Now one would think, so what? When you live in the woods and don't do graphic design, is it really all that important to distinguish colors? But now I'm going to say just one word and you'll understand it all. Tigers. In a predominantly green forest, a bright orange cat nearly 4 meters long will still be very noticeable, and no stripes will help, unless the unfortunate prey's eyesight allows the tigers to blend in with the foliage. Or maybe the problem with deer vision is that no one wants to see the antlers peeling off, because it's such a disgusting sight. The skin on the antlers supplies them with oxygen and nutrients, and when the antlers fully grow back, it's no longer needed and begins to come off. The reindeer try to speed up this process and intentionally rub their antlers against trees. As a result, the antlers are covered with bloody pieces of skin. They obstruct the view and turn the reindeer into a prop for a horror movie. The same thing, by the way, happens to moose, so not only can't the poor animals see danger, but they walk around covered in extra skin. That's perfect. I bet if deer could see the heat radiation of predators, that'd really help them. What's that? Is that an elephant? Whoa, it's hot as hell. The elephant is the largest modern land animal, but nature obviously screwed up with thermoregulation. The enormous mass of muscles and internal organs generates a lot of heat, while elephants don't sweat. They can't breathe with their tongues hanging out like dogs either. Meanwhile, elephants live in very hot regions where temperatures can reach 104 degrees Fahrenheit. In such conditions, an elephant can die from overheating in about 4 hours, unless, of course, it does something. So much for having muscles and height. Thank you, not evolution. You've probably seen how much fun elephants have dousing themselves in water. Well, it's not just because of their love for water procedures. Elephants really want to live. If you look at an elephant through a thermal imaging camera, wait, what the hell is that? Its ears are red hot. Also, its knees. But I'm more interested in those ears. I can literally see the vessels. It seems that instead of blood, elephants have real lava. But it's with their ears that these animals try to dump excess heat into the air. But you have to flap your ears to do it. And because of that, you can accidentally become a Disney story character.
Fly, Dumbo, fly.
Now that's someone who certainly didn't have a problem with thermoregulation. And while elephants are pouring water, smearing mud, and waving their ears around, this lizard has found a simpler way. It does this. Shovel-snouted lizards can only be found in the Namib Desert, very dry and virtually uninhabited. And I understand why no one wants to live here. During the day, the temperature of the sand reaches 158 degrees Fahrenheit. You definitely wouldn't want to walk barefoot there, but the lizard has to. Therefore, in order to survive, it moves very fast, at a speed of about 40 inches per second. But you can't run all the time. In order not to get burnt in a few seconds, the lizard has learned to lift its feet as high as possible above the sand. It looks so funny. Seriously, it should have some kind of appropriate dance soundtrack. But if you think about it, it's just awful. The temperature around is so high that even the ground beneath your feet is trying to kill you. Wish I had your problems. Oh, come on. What problems could a giraffe have? A tasteless leaf or a stiff neck? Well, they might get hit by an airplane. If somewhere on the highway deer suffer, then in Botswana, giraffes are under attack. Just like this poor guy who was the victim of a head-on collision with a Cessna right on the runway. Apparently it happened during a landing. Fortunately, the pilot suffered only minor injuries, but the plane and the giraffe weren't so lucky. And while history is silent as to exactly who was on the stick at the time of the collision, I have a hunch. And if you thought airplanes were the only problem for giraffes, have you ever seen these animals drink? They'd be happy if someone installed drinking fountains for them at head level. But that's not the case on the savannah, so giraffes have to quench their thirst from local water bodies. While drinking, the animals have to spread their legs wide apart to put their head low enough to reach the water. Not only do they look most unstable and funny in this position, but they're also particularly vulnerable to predators. That's why giraffes drink only if they're sure of their own safety. And now imagine that every urge to drink a glass of water is accompanied by a risk to be eaten. But really, the life of a giraffe from the very first seconds is like a game at the highest level of difficulty. Have you ever seen how they come into the world? It's practically a parachute jump, only nobody gives the newborns a parachute. You know, if you think about it, the physique of a giraffe looks like a mockery of nature. They're not mountain sheep. They certainly don't get into creepy or ridiculous. How the hell did you get there? You know, I can't even imagine it. You're not a cat, really. However, wild ungulates have problems like this too. You've probably seen the videos of mountain goats jumping up and down the steep cliffs as if they'd been bitten by a radioactive spider. It's impossible to watch them calmly. Seriously, my palms are sweating, I'm so afraid. But this ability to move where one should not move can play a very cruel trick on the animals. Sometimes goats get into very catty situations, finding themselves in places they can't get out of. But unlike cats, which you can remove from a tree with the help of a ladder, everything is much more complicated with ungulates. They're much more afraid of people than of gravity, so they can simply jump towards death. Not to mention that without help, a goat caught in such a situation is doomed to death in 100% of cases. It would seem that birds that jump off cliffs should have gotten it all figured out. After all, with the exception of a few species like penguins and ostriches, nature purposely designed them to fly. Did it help? Not all of them. Just 3 weeks after being born, guillemot chicks leave their parents' nest, jumping from a high cliff right into the cold water. Scientists believe that this happens when the chick's wings are already big enough to act as a primitive parachute, but that doesn't stop the birds from landing on the rocks before they reach the water. Those who survive the collision need to get off the rocks as soon as possible. There are hungry foxes constantly roaming below, and while nature probably knows what it's doing when it gives the chicks this training course, why so harsh? We'll see you later.